Hey, you got calls? I'm back. This is short order, okay? This was like an emergency podcast in a way because there was some news that came out today as of this recording. Today is a Thursday, October 17th. You know what time it is. Jumping right in. We're driving right in. CarQuicks podcast. Your host, Cameron Biggs, episode 69. Yes, we got to talk about something real exciting. So I know I did this prior with the McLaren W1. I'm not wasting any time. If you've been living under a rock or you just don't care about the automotive scene. So, if you don't care about automotive news, and you just didn't even check to see what was going on early this morning because some big player has joined the fray. Okay, we are one more manufacturer, or technically there's a car out there that could be put into the same realm, but we are very close to a repeat of the holy trinity of the supercars. Okay, when it was a McLaren P1, the Porsche 918 Spider, and the Ferrari LaFerrari. Okay, I talked about this before. About 2 weeks ago, I was talking about the McLaren W1, and right now we are back again. So before I start, how are you doing out there? How's your friends, your families, loved ones, colleagues, everybody? I hope you're doing well. I'm happy to see you again in short order because I just put up a podcast, not just yesterday. I mean, literally from this recording, and you get another one again. So you get to see my face multiple times during this week. And there might even be a third one if Porsche announces a new GT3 tomorrow. And I may not do a podcast on that because it's not like that large of a car as far as the realm of what I'm speaking about today and what I talked about the W1. But in general, this warrants a special episode, okay? And here's a couple reasons why. What I'm about to talk about relates to, my favorite supercar manufacturer. Okay, I don't really have many favorite cars. I'm a person that's really hard to pinpoint. If somebody says, "What's your favorite food?" I'm like, I can't do that. I love cooking. I like food. You just got to tell me what genre or what category of food. We're talking Mexican food, Italian, whatever it may be. You can't just say, "What's your favorite food?" because I can't even pinpoint what that would be. When it comes to cars, I'm very similar. If somebody gave me the task of saying you only could choose 5 cars, or you only could pick 3 cars for the rest of your life, or if you had unlimited funds, what's your car fleet of 10 cars looks like, right? It's hard to make those decisions, and it's hard to say which one is absolutely my favorite. But I can land on, if I ever hit the means to own a supercar, like outright brand new, like just go to the dealer, put your name down on a specific model, it's going to be Ferrari. And today they announced the Ferrari F80. That is why we are here today, folks. That's why I had to do another pod to talk. Okay? Similar to what I did again with the W1, Ferrari threw their hat into the fight. The Ferrari F80. Now, a couple things. The name I like. I like the fact that they went back to the F naming from like the F40 and the F50 and the F80. And they obviously had a reason because this is their 80th anniversary. And the F40 was their 40th and the F50 was their 50th. And they had other cars in between that. They had obviously the Enzo, and then they had the LaFerrari, and now they went back to the F80. So I enjoy the name. But what is this car to the overall scheme of what Ferrari's trying to achieve, what McLaren's trying to achieve, what we did back in 2013, what that meant for supercars, what that meant for sports cars in general. Honestly, some of that stuff trickled all the way down to what we have today. But let's just get to the specs real quick. And I got a lot of thoughts. I got things that I don't necessarily like, things I love, things that have me intrigued. Where does this land on the realm of what I think about the W1 to this? I mean, obviously, you check the hat. If you're watching the video, I got the Ferrari hat on today. So you're probably like, yo, we already know where you land. Okay, CarQuicks, you already said it. It's your favorite manufacturer. We already know what you think. But not necessarily. Let's talk about these specs real quick, though. I'm not going to waste much time. We have a twin-turbo hybrid V6. And I'm emphasizing the V6 part because We're talking about the Halo Ferrari. And everyone knows it normally holds a V12. I know McLaren has a V8, and I know they use V6s as well. McLaren, outside of the F1, was never known to be the V12 manufacturer, okay? Ferrari has put the V12 in everything but the F40 and now this F80. They've had it in the F50, they've had it in the Enzo, they've had it in the LaFerrari, they have it in that 12-cylinder model that just got announced this year. They've had it in 550 Maranellos, they've had it in A12 Superfast, they've had the V12 in a ton of vehicles. And the Halo, the one that is at the pinnacle of their road going prowess, okay, what they put the most engineering into, almost certainly is to be thought of having a V12. Okay, that is, I'm not missing that point, but we're gonna speak more about that later. Twin turbo V6 on its own, it makes 888 horsepower. Even though I've seen people throwing out numbers like 900, I don't know if it's a different scale what they were measuring at, but let's just say 888 horsepower, 900 basically. It has 3 electric motors. We have 2 in the front at the axles to operate the E all-wheel drive system. This is not rear-wheel drive like the W1. We have a third motor that sits in between the motor, the engine, the V6, and the 8-speed dual-clutch transmission. Together, these motors make about 294 horsepower, 300 horsepower in additional. The grand total comes to about 1,200 horsepower. I've seen another number running around that says 1,184. This could very well be the difference of measurement that we do in the US to what the UK does. So we're just going to say to round up 1,200 horsepower. All of this sounds very similar. Okay, the W1 has 1,275, twin turbo V8, bit of a hybrid system as well. This is very similar. We're in the same ballpark, right? Because all of these manufacturers are trickling down F1 technology down to their road car. Whatever they've learned on the grid is what they're putting down to the street. Ferrari is taking this a step further, I would say. They're using what they call the MGUK electric motor. That's that third motor that's in between the engine and the transmission. Very unique. If you've been following F1, if you like Ferrari, if that's your team, I like Ferrari and I like Mercedes, but I'm really going to like Ferrari next year because Lewis Hamilton's there, so that's going to be exciting. But they've been using this in their F1 cars. So if you've heard this name, if you've been following, maybe you watch Drive to Survive, they've mentioned, I've heard them talk about it in there just in passing. But in general, Ferrari has been using this electric motor that they've designed entirely in-house in their Formula One car. And the reason why it's important and the reason why Ferrari is probably talking so much about this is because everything that they've done on this F80 is an in-house exercise, meaning there isn't really, if there's outside people coming in, it's minimal, okay? Very minimal. So we have the 3 electric motors. We have the third one that's called the MGUK option. The MJUK sounds like MGK, I'm saying, but MGUK electric motor. Altogether, 0 to 60 from a standstill, 2.1 seconds, 0 to 124, 5.8 seconds, top speed, 217 miles an hour. These are outrageous numbers. Now, here's the thing, though. Sometime this week, when I was recording this podcast, a certain American manufacturer cracked a 233 mile an hour top speed in a car that I can go get at a local dealership without the hoops of fire you're going to have to jump into to get an F80. So we'll talk about that later when I get to some other thoughts I have on the car. So everybody isn't really playing around. McLaren definitely isn't playing around with that W1. You saw it, you see the specs. That is going to be a monster on the track. Ferrari is here now to say we also will be going crazy on the track as well and on the road. So this is wild times right now. We're kind of getting back to that 2013 feeling. We got 2 monster players throwing out their best example of what they think of as the pinnacle of performance road going car. I know we have Bugattis, I know we have Koenigseggs. I still, like I said, and Pagani, I still put those in a separate category here. I do think that McLaren and Ferrari are the test bed or the bar for how fast or how amazing or how, what's the word I want to use? The ability of these cars to run on tracks, how efficient they can be, how powerful they can be, how good they can be on reducing the lap times. I do think that the bar is set with McLaren and Ferrari and those type of players, but I digress because that can be argued down to the, smallest detail. Everybody has a different opinion when it comes to that. But here's what I'm saying. The W1 and the F80, for what they're trying to achieve here, they're putting everything that they've learned from motorsports into their chassis. From F1 to endurance racing, whatever it may be, they're putting it inside of these chassis. So the F80 follows that same design language, that same engineering language. We are putting what we learned in F1 and LeMans racing into the chassis. So one of the very big things when it comes to this F80 that I was reading is active aero. And we're going to spend a little bit of time here because they did some really interesting things. McLaren did the same thing with the W1. When I was talking about the rear wing that had the ability to go to a long tail that paid homage to their original McLaren F1 long tail, that is all what Ferrari is doing as well too. Active aero is the name of the game. If these cars aren't producing wild amount of downforce, then we're doing it all wrong. Everybody is playing a game of how much can I get this car stuck to the ground and going as fast as I can around these corners. So active aero in the F80. One of the key features they have, and if you're watching the video, I'm going to throw up a screen, a little shot of what they call the S duct. So the S duct is the area in the front that is basically connects two of the front winglets in the front to form like a triangular way of pushing the air through the front of the car from under through this. I want to say a hood, but it's really not a hood. Honestly, it's just a structural point to pull the air in over the car, down into the engine, obviously down into the wing, into the rear wing. And this is all connected by the front of this car. And it's all inspired by their LeMans 499P. So Ferrari won the LeMans 24 hours in 2023 and 2024 with a 499P, right? And so the reason why they're utilizing a V6, the reason why they're utilizing this S duct, the reason why they're utilizing a lot of this active aero is because they learned all this stuff from that car. So let's get down to some of the things that are really cool. So you have this system, aerodynamics. The large rear wing in the back plays a massive role in what this F80 is doing. But here's one of the things that it does. It's kind of wild. So you have this active rear wing. We already know that if you see it brake and it flips up, it has like almost a DRS type of option, or air brake, as they would say. So they have like air brake option. When the wing comes up, it's going to stop, obviously forcing more air to slow this car down. But there's something very interesting. The rear wing has the ability to move up and down, high downforce, low drag. But it works in conjunction with a vehicle system that measures the speed, acceleration, steering angle in real time, and it decides what's best as far as load, balance, resistance, in conjunction with the low drag and the high downforce based on the driver's driving style. Now, they said this is all happening in real time on the new Ferrari system, basically the brain of the computer. That's a lot happening. The Porsche GT3 RS has active aero. Same thing. You have dials and ability in the car to change it to what the track is doing. It can actively look at the steering angle, the dampening, the speed, the approach angle. This isn't something necessarily brand new in the umbrella term of active aero. But what I think Ferrari is doing uniquely here is that they're basing it on a lot of things that are like a model of what the driver in the car is doing in real time to adjust it based on the track and where they're driving and how they're driving. What this means when somebody drives it, I don't know. I'm just waiting for one of these dealerships or one of these journalists to get their hands on this car so that they can go ahead and test it and find out. But that sounds absolutely nuts. But we're not done yet. You got active aero, we got the drag, we got the S duct, we got the under chassis, Venturi tunnels, gurney flaps, everything is channeling air in and around this car. 2,314 pounds of downforce. I thought the McLaren W1 was pushing out a lot because it was borderline. Like I said, you can drive it on the ceiling. That's how much downforce the McLaren W1 was doing. It was like 2,200. This does 2,314 pounds of downforce when everything is in obviously high downforce mode, when everything is actively working. That's crazy. And if you look at the way this car looks, right? it doesn't have necessarily exaggerated areas where you could see that they're forcing downforce as much as they can. Like the Koenigsegg Jesko has a fixed massive rear wing. So you would imagine, yes, that's going to have massive downforce. The Viper ACR had a massive rear wing. You're like, that's going to have monster downforce. This is interesting because outside of their wing being in high downforce mode, everything is fairly subtle when it comes to where you can see the air and the way the downforce is channeled around the car. But let's continue. We got more to talk about. Probably the piece that has me the most interested in how it will perform on the track, how journalists respond to how this car handles and steers and responds to being driven at its limit, is their suspension. Now, standard double wishbone, has a full, coilover type of suspension. But every corner has a 48-volt electric motor attached to the damper, not anywhere else on the car, directly right on top. Here's what I read. In real time, in conjunction with that vehicle system that's looking at the active aero and the approach angle and the steering and the acceleration and who the driver is and what they've been doing, it'll modify the suspension by the millisecond to what the car needs, right? If you're driving on the road, it will just be compliant because you're not driving hard enough. It realizes that you just want to cruise along. It's going to soften up the suspension. This ability of these motors allows it to not have anti-roll bars. It's not necessary. But when you're driving it hard and you're driving at the limit, depending on whatever side of the corner, whatever it's doing, it can go from soft to hard, from immediate response to holding the car in place to making sure you have more traction within milliseconds. We're doing this in conjunction with all the active air in the vehicle system. It's all talking. So what I suspect that the brain of this whole entire car is the real star here, right? The car in general is going to be talked about. But when I was reading about the vehicle systems, the active aero, the active damper, the active suspension, I was like, okay, so if you have all these vehicle systems talking to each other, and is pulling it from like a driver profile or like a digital version or map of what the car is doing, that is really cool. I mean, to me, that was the coolest aspect of this car reading it. And I know it's kind of like, anybody listening to this podcast, they're like, this is kind of geeking out about like the technical details. But that is what probably got them to win the LeMans racing and what gets them to be one of the top players in F1 racing. You're talking about all of these real motorsport level of engineering trickling itself down to a car that a normal person is going to be able to drive and own. So continuing on, interior. Now, the interior is really, really interesting. See, McLaren, when they did the W1, I like the interior of that one too. Standard 2+2 seater, right? 1+1. Ferrari did something a little bit different. What they did is they did an option that was called a 1+. Not a 1+1, just 1+. The driver's seat is the focus. Nowhere else has there been this much of a push for the driver to be almost cocooned in a car that can have another passenger. Like they had the SP3, which is like a single seater. They have single seater cars. They've done that plenty of times. The McLaren F1 or the new Gordon Murray, the T50, have a center seating position. The Speedtail had that. So it's not like we haven't had the situation where the driver is the main focus and the passengers are kind of off and behind. So Ferrari did what they call the 1+. So the driver's seat is the main focus and the passenger seat is pushed behind the driver. It's still off to the side, but you could tell it's behind the driver. But by design, it is literally just like fabric on the monocoque. Like this looks like it's just padding on the carbon fiber tub. Like this passenger is not getting anything else. There's no moving the seat up and down. You're not reclining. You're getting the seat belt, some padding, and hold on. Now, the driver, you can tell from this picture, the seat right here is red, but I went on the configurator and you can change that to yellow, blue. You can actually have fun with this whole setup. So the driver position is completely focused on the driver. It's kind of cocooned in. You got the steering wheel, which is new. It's almost like a yoke style, but not, I would say like an oval basically, but you can see the picture. It's kind of squared off. It has a screen in front of it. It has a center console, which does not have a screen, but you can get another screen for the passenger to I guess, watch how fast you're going, or maybe they can stream, I don't know, a video to it. But what they've done here is paid homage to the F40. Now, I noticed this immediately when I saw the interior. If you look at the interior, what you see is that center console that they have there, it is very minimal. The only thing that you get is capacitive buttons. You get some levers that are for like some other buttons, carbon fiber, looks like a matte carbon fiber. And then on the door, you get this red strap that opens up the door, buttons for the power windows. But if you look at it, and if you look at the F40, you can see the design, you can see the DNA. You can see where they were pulling from the F40 in a way to say, like, listen, the driver here, like some of these buttons and the way this cockpit looks is very jet fighter-ish, which I know is like a overused term when it comes to explaining a cockpit or interior inside of a supercar. I mean, we've used that plenty of times. But when I'm looking at this, I can see that F40 DNA and that lineage right in there, which is those small details. So the driver is clearly focused on the task at hand. Drive this thing as fast as you can. And the seat obviously is not like the passenger seat. It's a full-fledged bucket that can move and adjust. But the point here is that Ferrari aimed at making this interior only highlight what the driver is doing, which I find cool in this aspect, right? They could have done the standard 2-seat thing. McLaren W1 has an awesome interior as well. I do like Ferrari separating themselves in this aspect by saying we're focused on what the driver can do. So interior is fire. I do like how this looks. Now, you can't, obviously there's Alcantara everywhere. I saw in the configurator you can align it to whatever you want it to be. Storage, listen, I was reading about the storage on this thing. Not that it's like a pressing matter. I don't think anybody buying a McLaren W1 or a Ferrari F80 is like, if I can't hold my luggage, it's a no-go. Ferrari said for the first time ever, at least the W1 had a shelf, like a parcel shelf behind you that looked like it could actually handle some luggage. Ferrari said for the first time ever in one of their Halo cars, they have enough space for a 24-hour suitcase. That's called a backpack. Okay, I don't know why they said a 24-hour suitcase. Listen, it's a backpack. The little shelf they have in between the seats for whatever you could put back there, maybe a bag from Trader Joe's. That's about it. And then they said there's another like little cubby net somewhere by the passenger. Listen, this is not for you to haul your stuff. If you got enough money for one of these cars, listen, you can buy your clothes when you get there. So interior looks good. The performance sounds crazy. The downforce it can produce, the way this vehicle system operates with the active aero and the active suspension. I mean, all I hear when I was reading this is, oh, they took basically their race car and put a street body on it. They took everything they've learned from LeMans and they won, what they're learning from Formula One, and they pretty much dumped it all into this car, which is what they do, which is what makes this exciting, which is why we care about the W1 for the car enthusiasts, which is why we like to see these crazy cars. I know they're not in the realm of my purchasing ability, okay? This thing costs $3.9 million, and they're making 799 of them. Now, I know when it comes to these type of cars, most people, sometimes they look at them and say, they're so out of touch, I don't care. I like to just see the technology and I like to see the cars. I mean, I'm never going to say that I don't want to see a crazy Halo supercar like a Ferrari F80 or F40 or F50 or McLaren P1. Who don't like those? I mean, I love them. So seeing what Ferrari has done here, I like the fact that it is not necessarily just a copy of like, hey, here's a really fast supercar that we put all our technology in. The interior and the outside and the aero and the vehicle systems to me shows a very cool mixture of future ideas, present ideas, past ideas, right? But the V6 is something I want to talk about some more, right? I know that in the realm of these cars, the V12 being missing is going to be a sticking point, down to the fact that people are going to compare it to like a Jaguar XJ220, because I thought the same thing. When they were coming out with that car, supposed to be V12, they could develop it. It was all backed up with money and overspending, so they put a V6 in it. And so when you look at the McLaren W1, it has a twin-turbo V8. If you look at the Lamborghini Revuelto, it has a V12. If you look at the Aston Martin Valkyrie, if you look at the AMG 1, I mean, these have big, proper, large engines that are kind of the special piece to these supercars, if that makes any sense. It's like maybe, yes, you can be more efficient or probably just as powerful on smaller engines, but just that nuance of that sound and that motor is what pushes people to want those type of motors in there. The difference I think here that happened is that Ferrari won the Le Mans race in a car that was pushing this same engine. So if anybody is looking at their motorsport division saying, we want you to show us what you're doing so that we can put this in our next Halo car for our anniversary, if they're on a podium with a V6 twin turbo with a hybrid system and this electric motor in-house, then Ferrari is going to do exactly what they were known for since the beginning, and that was racing. Enzo Ferrari talked about this. If you ever read a book about his biography, racing was the point. The road cars were a means of making money to go racing. So while, I mean, I can talk from like the armchair of a pseudo, dream car, maybe one day type of owner and say, I wish it had a V12. But if I think about Ferrari and what they're trying to achieve, I think about McLaren and what they're trying to achieve. And I've said it before, they're about the numbers. They want this thing to be as fast as it can around a track, probably the Fiona, racetrack. They want it to have the most amount of downforce. They want it to have the most amount of power. They want it to shift the fastest. They want it to have the most ability to adjust the suspension on the fly in real time. So the numbers matter. And then that leads me to the design. So I think the F80 looks good. The same way I think that the McLaren W1 looks good as well, too. It obviously it looks like the front end, looks like the 12-cylinder with this black bar that pays homage to the old Ferrari Daytona. The cylindry, I understand having that look. The F80, I don't understand, because if the 12-cylinder was like, hey, remember when we put in V12 in, big coupes, that has a V12 in a big coupe, it makes sense. I understand the DNA, I understand the lineage. If we're talking about you having design language inside of the interior that looks like the F40, if you're pulling from F50s with like some of the curved rear area of the car from the wing, and thinking of how the fixed wing on the F40 and F50 was, if you're pulling from the LaFerrari with some more of the curves, you're pulling from the Enzo, then none of that design language to me would say, let's put this like black bar in the front that has, homage to like the Daytona. Maybe they were pulling it from the 250 GTO. I don't know. I do say that, as I said it with the McLaren, what Ferrari wants to achieve here, if I'm looking at this S-duct and the active arrow, I'm sure that what they want to achieve isn't so easily figured out with a design that's a little bit more beautiful. This is a functional design. This is function over form. I said on the W1, the numbers that they're trying to achieve, I suspect that nobody can really get there right now, or they care to get there right now in a car that looks a certain way. Because this looks very, for lack of a better term, this reminds me of a Lego Technic set, or Technica, if that's what it's called. Because it's very blocky. The front end's very blocky, and then you get to like kind of a smooth rear. It doesn't curve as aggressive as the W1, but you see the curves in there, but it's still a fairly blocky design. If you're thinking about the LaFerrari, that was more curves, but I won't knock them completely, because the Enzo was blocky, and then the F50 had curves, and then the F40 was blocky. So if I'm thinking about what's going on, if I'm looking at the F40, blocky, squared off design. Then they went F50, curved, a lot more free-flowing design. Then they went Enzo. And when the Enzo first came out, folks were not feeling that front end. They were not. I remember it. They were talking about that nose, which was supposed to emulate the nose of an F1 car. Folks were not feeling it. Years later, we're like, that's one of the greatest Ferraris ever made. So, my little opinion here don't mean anything in the grand scheme of things. In the end, we're probably all going to say that was one of the greatest Ferraris ever made on the F80. Then we had the LaFerrari, back to the curves. Now we have the F80, more of a square design. I think that's on purpose, okay? And I thought about that as I'm talking. So I was thinking before, like, it's kind of a blocky design, but now that I'm thinking about the cars and the F40, F50s and what they've been doing, I'm like, oh, wait a minute. This might be on purpose, because the 250 GTO was more curvature. Then you had the F40, F50, Enzo, Ferrari F80. So they might be actually doing this on purpose when it comes to how it was designed. But I still will say this. Between the F1, F80, and the W1, we are looking at car design now that has a sole purpose of saying, that we're trying to achieve maximum velocity, maximum downforce. Okay, that's how these cars are designed. And I know it's like a preference, right? Because we preferred the cars that we had on our posters as children, which had more of an emotional design to it. They were definitely not performing at this level. None of them cars could touch what these are about to do on the track. But they had an emotion to them for how they looked. It was the cars could sit still and they look like they're already going fast. And not that the F80 doesn't, because I like how this does look. Now, do I prefer it over the W1? I mean, my love of Ferrari will have me lean towards it. I think they both look good. I think the W1 has it a little bit beat when it comes to how the front end kind of comes together more to a point. The F80 is more squared off, kind of, it's more butch. It's more, aggressive from the way the angles are very straight lined. And the W1 kind of tries to curve into the front end. So I can lean towards them saying they kind of have a little bit of a more appealing design to it. The F80 is extremely functional, you can tell. And the 499P, the LeMans car, you can tell that's where a lot of that lower grille section comes from. And so if you look at the video, I'll throw a picture up. You can kind of see that design language. You can see like, okay, I see what they're trying to achieve, what they're doing. They're trying to flow a lot of air through these S ducts and these winglets, and they're trying to force this downforce, which is why they made 2,314 pounds of it. So this thing looks amazing. Now, like I said, we have about 1,200 horsepower. We got a twin turbo V6. We got 626 foot-pounds of torque also on that motor. Red line is 9,200 RPMs. It's going to sound crazy. I know it's a V6, and usually V6s don't have that kind of a visceral sound, definitely not like a V12, not like a V8. But I think Ferrari will have achieved some sound that is good on this car. Hopefully. If not, somebody like Gentani got you with a titanium exhaust that'll have this thing screaming and spitting flames out. So if you get one of these, you can. And you're going to need to have $3.9 million. You're going to need to have been somewhere on the Ferrari list to even get this. They're making $799, which is pretty impressive because they made, I think it was 399 Enzos. The Ferrari was 499. Now they're making 799. So Ferrari knows that there is obviously more people that are willing to give them $4 million plus. I do wonder if it diminishes the overall cost or how much the value of these cars have going forward. I do think that the LaFerrari, the Enzo, and the F50 are going to skyrocket in price because this is an indicator that the end of the V12 has already happened. If you have a LaFerrari after this announcement, they were already trading for about $5 to $6 million. Them things are going to about 7 or 8. The F50 is going to be slowly right behind it. Obviously, the F40 has always been world renowned and loved, but the F50, Enzo, and LaFerrari are about to really go crazy because that's the only ones that had a V12. Not to say that later on Ferrari doesn't come back and put a V12 in a Halo car, but we've been 10 years in the making. The F80 has been rumored, talked about, and it's exciting to just see it here. I cannot wait till they test these cars. I hope that we do not get the shenanigans that they tried to pull off when they didn't want the 918 and the P1 and the LaFerrari on the same track. Please just put the W1 and the F80 on the track so we could just see the numbers and have fun and shoot the video. Nobody wants to see you guys having your egos in the way, saying it can't be faster than me. Listen, if y'all got to bring the stickiest, slicks, barely legal tires you can, then hey, bring it so that we can see what these things can do on a proper track. I'm waiting to see who reviews it. I saw a few videos of people walking around it in person, but nobody's driven this thing. So I don't even know who's going to be the one to do it. Autocar, probably a Car Magazine, or maybe Chris Harris or somebody like that. I'm just waiting to see them get their hands on it. And this is an exciting time. Now, before I wrap this up, though, I was talking about the top speed earlier. 217 miles an hour. Now, during the same week, the Corvette ZR1, which is, props to Chevy because that car is just so crazy because it's a Corvette. It's a regular Corvette. It's not an F80. It's not a W1. It's a regular Corvette that you're going to see at a Chevrolet dealership as you're driving down the highway next to them Silverados. Okay. Their top speed that they did on the ZR1 was 233 miles an hour. And you're going to get comments, people saying, I'd rather have a ZR1. I'd rather have this. This one's faster. ZR1 is better, and you can get 20 of them for the same price of a LaFerrari or, an F80. Anybody that's buying an F80, if I could afford an F80, then I can afford a ZR1. And I probably would have one too because I would say I have a massive collection of cars. I got Corvettes, I got Ferraris, I got, random JDM classics. So it's not apples to apples comparison. It really doesn't even match up or make any sense to me. It's like, listen, the ZR1 is a Corvette. This is a Ferrari F80. We are in two different worlds, right? And the people that are looking at F80s to add to their Ferrari collection, they weren't asking about the top speed. And 217, 233, listen, you're going to need a lot of space to pull that off. But the point of this car that they're going to aim it at is going to be on the track. So it will be dope if we can get to ZR1 and W1 and F80 and whatever Porsche is about to do next on a track, maybe with the Valkyrie, maybe with the AMG 1. If we can just get that together and just look at the ZR1 as what they're going to put as the underdog and see what that can do. See, that's exciting. I don't know if that will ever happen. There is an AMG 1 in the U.S., just randomly speaking about it, because they got delivered to a track, I think it was like in North Carolina or something. But there is one in the U.S., so there's potential to see somebody actually test this up against something like an F80 or W1. And that's pretty much it. Like I said, had to do a little bit of emergency one, had to talk about one of my favorite brands, the F80 and Ferrari, and just talk about what they're doing. Like I said, this is exciting times. You're getting full-fledged Holy Trinity levels of massive performing cars from McLaren and Ferrari. I don't know what Porsche is doing, but listen, Aston Martin already gave us the Valkyrie. Mercedes gave us the AMG 1. So there's already cars out there that these can go up against. I don't know what Porsche is going to do tomorrow on this recording. They're supposed to be talking about the next GT3. I'll probably put that into the next episode of the podcast I do next week. But I just want to say, exciting times. Ferrari F80, like I said, it looks good. The design is functional, and I do understand that's where we're headed now. But as I always say, thank you for joining. Thank you for being at this episode, listening to another one. You've gotten 2 back-to-back now. You can thank me later when you see me in the streets. I'll be at the SEMA show. If you see me there and you understand or recognize me, holler at me. Until then, do as you wish and do as you may. It's Karen Biggs, your host. This is CarQuicks. I'll see y'all around. Peace.